Welcome to World News by Denis Halandzovskyi. If you value calm, accurate, and analytical reporting on pressing global developments, please subscribe, leave a comment, and share your perspective. Today we examine a significant escalation in Europe's response to Belarus, new sanctions aimed at key economic sectors, and intensified scrutiny of political repression, including the case of Nobel Peace Prize laureate Ales Bialiatski. Belarus, long a close ally of Russia, has increasingly drawn criticism from Western governments over human rights abuses, political oppression, and its role in regional security dynamics. In the latest round of punitive measures, European leaders agreed to expand sanctions that target some of the country's most important economic assets, particularly the potash industry. Potash, a key ingredient in fertilizer, is one of Belarus's most valuable exports. The industry generates significant revenue and links Minsk to global agricultural supply chains. By placing sanctions on potash producers, European policymakers are sending a strong message. Economic consequences must follow sustained repression of civil society and democratic activists. This decision did not come easily. Some European nations were wary out of concern for global food prices and supply stability. Potash is deeply integrated into fertilizer markets, and major disruptions could have ripple effects for farmers and consumers worldwide. Yet, spurred by mounting evidence of human rights violations and the persistence of authoritarian governance in Belarus, many governments concluded that decisive action was necessary. Supporters of the sanctions argue that targeting economic sectors tied closely to the Belarusian state rather than ordinary citizens strikes a balance between applying pressure on political elites and minimizing harm to everyday people. By weakening the hand of those in power, the hope is to encourage restraint and, ultimately, political change. Critics, however, counter that such broad economic measures risk unintended consequences. Higher fertilizer costs can feed into rising food prices globally, particularly in developing regions already grappling with instability. They also warn that targeted entities may simply shift trade routes toward markets less aligned with Western norms, diluting the sanctions' intended impact. At the heart of Europe's intensified focus on Belarus is the continued imprisonment of Ales Bialiatski, a prominent human rights defender and Nobel Peace Prize laureate. Bialiatski's work has long centered on civil liberties, democratic reform, and accountability for state abuses. His detention became symbolic, a focal point for critics of Minsk's repressive policies. European officials and international rights groups argue that Bialiatski's prosecution is politically motivated, a tactic used by authoritarian regimes to silence dissent. They say that his continued incarceration reflects a wider pattern of suppression. Journalists, opposition figures, and activists are regularly detained, restricted, or intimidated as Belarus's leadership cracks down on independent civic life. By incorporating human rights concerns into its sanctions framework, the European Union is asserting that political repression cannot be decoupled from economic engagement. This represents a melding of moral and strategic imperatives, standing against abuses while leveraging economic policy to influence behavior. But this approach also raises complex questions about sovereignty and diplomatic engagement. Some policymakers caution that punitive measures could entrench Minsk's alignment with Russia, reducing the likelihood of internal reform. They advocate parallel tracks, sanctions combined with channels of dialogue that preserve opportunities for negotiation or gradual political openings. For Belarusian civil society, the sanctions send a mixed signal. On one hand, they affirm international solidarity with democratic activists and condemn systemic abuses. On the other, they may deepen isolation, limit economic opportunities, and disproportionately impact communities already struggling under economic strain. Internationally, this situation contributes to broader debates about how democracies balance moral principles with geopolitical strategy. Should economic penalties be used to punish human rights abuses, even at potential cost to global markets? And how can external pressure support rather than suppress indigenous democratic movements? In the larger context of European security, Belarus remains a crucial pivot point. Its geopolitical orientation, historically tied to Russia, has ramifications for NATO, EU neighbors, and regional stability. By tightening sanctions, Europe signals not only disapproval of internal repression, but also unease with Minsk's strategic choices. Thank you for watching this report on world news by Denis Halandzovskyi. If this analysis was helpful, please subscribe, leave a comment, and share your perspective. Independent reporting and thoughtful discussion help us understand complex international challenges. Stay informed and see you in the next update.